who have had herpes cold sores, for instance, or herpes sores elsewhere in the body, you know that they are conditions that come and go, but what comes is the condition. What goes is the condition, but the virus that caused it never goes. The virus, once you are infected with it, remains permanently in your body for the rest of your life. There is no way the immune system can eradicate herpes virus infections. So once infected, always infected. The difference is that in most people, that virus infection, even though it's permanent, is kept quiet. It's kept asleep by the immune system, so that you may have, many people do have, herpes infections but never get a cold sore, or just get a cold sore now and then. The virus is still there. Same is true with other kinds of viruses, like retroviruses. Once you're infected with them, there's no way that the immune system can eradicate them. The best it can do is keep them suppressed. That's a very important concept because I think it applies to chronic fatigue syndrome. Next slide. Another important thing to realize about infections and the illnesses that they cause is that many syndromes can be caused by multiple different microbes. For example, the common cold can be caused by literally hundreds of different viruses. There's no way a doctor can tell if you walk into the office with a cold which of the hundreds of viruses that can cause the cold are causing it. That is, we do have techniques for identifying some of them, but we don't use them because it sort of doesn't matter because the cold gets better anyway. Hepatitis can be caused by a group of different viruses. So many syndromes, and I think it will be true of chronic fatigue syndrome, can be triggered by multiple different microbes. Some diseases may not just occur when one infectious agent enters the body. Some may require several infectious agents in the body to collaborate with one another to make you sick. Another important concept. Next slide. So, the first time I talked to this group, which I think, my notes aren't perfect on this, I think was in 1989, Bonnie, I said this: infectious agents probably can trigger and perpetuate CFS. Not necessarily in all cases, but in many. The agents cannot be fully eradicated by the immune system. That is, those agents that can cause CFS may be very different from one another in many respects, but they will share the property of not being fully eradicated by the immune system. Third, there's evidence that CFS can follow a new infection. I talked about several studies in the literature that showed people getting a new infection and going on to CFS, but those were small studies, not very many people. And it is possible that in CFS, different infectious agents interact to cause symptoms, just what I said a minute ago. So those were the points we made now more than 20 years ago. And those are the points that I think still will prove to be true, and I'll talk about them. Next slide. So which infectious agents have been linked to chronic fatigue syndrome? One is Epstein-Barr virus. There are some people, but a minority of people with CFS, whose CFS began following an initial infection with Epstein-Barr virus. There are other people whose CFS has followed Q fever, a kind of illness that is found mainly in farming communities because that's where the bacteria that causes it lives. Ross River virus. Lyme disease, which is a bacterial infection, can lead to CFS. Parvovirus, another virus, can lead to CFS, and we published a paper just a month ago, primarily work done by Jonathan Kerr in London that I think shows this pretty nicely. Enteroviruses are another class of infectious agent that I think have been linked to CFS. Maybe an illness, an agent called born disease virus, but that's not solid. A herpes virus called human herpes virus 6 that I'll talk a little bit about, that we've spent a lot of time studying. And then lately, starting last October, a retrovirus called xenotropic murine leukemia-related virus, XMRV, that I'll talk about in a moment as well. Next slide. A very important study was published in 2006, organized by the CDC, conducted in Australia, in a very small community in Australia where there was only a small group of doctors, one hospital, one laboratory, farming community surrounded by miles and miles of nothing. So people lived in that community, they got their medical care in that community, they got their ongoing medical care in that community, and you could follow what happened to every single person in that community who got a particular type of infection, and know that you were going to be able to follow all of them for several years. Couldn't do that in Boston, Massachusetts. 256 patients who had had 3 different kinds of infections were followed over the course of 1 year in the first report. 11% of them developed chronic fatigue syndrome. It was the same percentage with each of those very different infectious agents. And CFS was more likely to occur in the people whose illness was most severe initially and who were producing these cytokines, these immune system chemicals that I've said are the way the immune system orchestrates an attack against an infectious agent. And the cytokines that I've said, in my judgment, are very likely the cause of the symptoms of CFS. Most important, they were able to study the psychology of these patients before they got sick and after they developed CFS, and they could not find any psychiatric factors or socioeconomic or demographic factors that made people more likely to develop CFS. It was not, for example, the people who had had a history of depression who got one of these infections who then went on to develop CFS. That happened, but it happened just as often in people without depression. So no psychiatric link that they could find. And the Dr. Hickey, the first author of this study, is a psychiatrist, and he was looking for that. Next slide. Enteroviral infection. There's really one investigator, Dr. John Cha in Los Angeles, who has done most of this work, and until one person's work is replicated by many others, all of us take it with a grain of salt. But he has biopsied the stomach, the lining of the stomach in people with CFS, typically people who had a lot of stomach symptoms as part of their CFS, and found enteroviruses in the lining of the stomach much more often in CFS patients than in healthy controls. Next slide. This is just a picture to show you what he sees. The brown stain in this stomach biopsy is a stain for the virus, and this is a stain with another virus on the right that doesn't stain brown. So, and healthy people's biopsies don't show this brown stain the way the CFS patients do. So his studies are fairly persuasive that this kind of virus, enterovirus, is in the gut more often in patients with CFS. Whether it is actually causing the illness remains to be seen. Next slide. Neurologic findings are present in many, but not all, patients with CFS. And I'm specifying episodes of encephalitis when the illness began. What are called white matter abnormalities in the brain. Part of the brain is called the white matter on MRI scans, and brainwave abnormalities. Next slide. The virus called human herpes virus 6, or HHV6, was discovered about 20 years ago although it's been with us for thousands, with our species, the human